Hello, this is Kaylia in 2020. What you are about to hear is the remastered version of the episode that you clicked on. Why? Well, it turns out that when I started this podcast, I got some incorrect information regarding copyright law and fair use policy. After nearly 2 years of making content, this oversight was brought to my attention. There was mild panic, lots of guilt, and then a few fervent nights doing research. It seems we might exist in this gray, nebulous area of fair use for critique and commentary, and thus our use of a teeny tiny bit of the music from the soundtracks of the movies that we are critiquing and commenting on might be allowable. But then again, it might not. So a few things. 1, I don't want to be a jerk, even accidentally. 2, I think it's important to acknowledge when you mess up. But 3, and this is key, I think acknowledging your mess up isn't enough. You have to rectify the situation if possible. And guess what? It's totally possible to go back into these old episodes and clip out the maybe illegal, maybe just slightly crappy bit of audio and replace it with a bit of music created just for me by the same composer and performer who made us our theme music. Which is what I'm going to do. And since I can't help but tinker just a smidge, I might clean up a teeny tiny bit of audio noise while I'm in there. I mean, I've learned a lot over the last 2 years, and who knows, you might be stumbling upon this podcast feed years from now. So why should your present-day ears be punished because way back in time, I hadn't yet found the noise reduction button? Anyway, without further ado, here is the podcast you came here for, just slightly better. Thanks for listening.
It's the Pages and Popcorn podcast.
Special guest!
Kaylia will edify. It's the Pages and Popcorn podcast.
Special guest!
Her and Kaylia are gonna talk, so you'd better damn well listen.
Hello and welcome to Pages and Popcorn Podcast, the podcast where I, Kaylia, a huge book nerd, talk about movies based on books, as well as the original source material. Today I am joined by a very special guest, and I will get to her in just a sec. But first, I want to remind you all of the ways that you can connect with Pages and Popcorn Podcast on the internet. As you know, we have a webpage where you can find sources, references, and updates about the show. You can also connect to us via our Facebook page or our Twitter, both searchable by typing Pages and Popcorn Podcast into your search bar. So no matter how you do the social media thing, you can connect with us. And of course, you are welcome to email us directly at pagesandpopcornpodcast@gmail.com. We want to really encourage you to rate and review us on whatever platform you listen to us on, especially iTunes, because that will help other people find us. And as always, we want to thank our patrons for their ongoing support. $1 a month, or $5 if you are especially generous, helps us keep doing this, and I really love doing this. So, let me introduce my very special guest. You might have noticed that was all me in the intro this morning, or afternoon, or evening, or whenever it is that you're listening. Jennifer is not here today, not in the studio, but I do have Cyndal with me. Cyndal, would you like to say hello to the audience?
Hello, audience. I'm so glad to be here.
Yes, I am very glad to have you here. This is very exciting for me personally, but I'm sure it's exciting for you too. We are going to be doing the book Practical Magic, which was published in 1995 and then made into a movie in 1998. So Not a lot of time between the two. And before we get to the recap, Cyndal, I asked you specifically to be my guest for this very specific book and movie combo because you're Sandra Bullock's stunt double, right? That's obviously why you would be here.
That would be wonderful. If that were true, yes.
No, okay. So really, though, would you like to share your personal why you're here, and then we'll get into the recap?
Yeah, so I am here because I am a practicing witch, and I have been a pagan practicing witchcraft for over 20 years now. I run a local group here that practices the Wiccan Sabbats as they go through the Wheel of the Year. I'm also on our local city mayor's faith-based council as the sole pagan entity, and I am just a witch aficionado.
There you go.
Yeah.
Very cool. And we will talk more specifically about what it means to be a witch and the different types of witches and that word pagan that you tossed around a little bit. And but first, I'm going to do our recap. So settle back, friends. We've got quite a bit of recap to do. Okay, first we have the novel. The book is very poetic in tone and full of deep, sensual details. The basic plot is as follows. Jillian and Sally are orphan children when their parents die in a fire started by lightning. The two girls go to live with their aunts, who are witches, the best-kept non-secret secret in the sleepy East Coast town. The ancestors of the aunts, the Owens women, as they are called, have always been witches, and there is a curse about death befalling any man who loves an Owens woman. Or maybe it's the man that Owen women love. It's a little bit murky. The children in the town are cruel to the sisters and tease them. The girls are outcasts. The aunts, who are not overly described until much later in the book, like seriously, they're not even named until like the last 20 pages of this book, are small and magic and eschew all sorts of rules. The girls are allowed to roam free and be little vagabonds. They are allowed to eat chocolate cake for dinner and have no bedtime. They deal with their parents' death and the living of the aunts in very opposite ways. Sally becomes a little domestic goddess. She cooks nutritious meals, she cleans, she wants nothing more than to be normal. Jillian is her polar opposite. The aunts do magic, mostly love spells, and the girls watch in secret and vow to never fall in love because it controls you, and they see all the horrible repercussions. One story of note is the girl from the pharmacy who lusts after a married man, gives up her voice in order to obtain him, and he drives her frickin' nuts. He's so in love with her, he will not leave her alone. The adage of be careful what you wish for is in full force. When the girls get into high school, Jillian becomes a beauty, and all the boys suddenly love her, and she runs through them like me eating a package of Girl Scout cookies. Also, Jillian wants the magic, but Sally is pretty firmly against it and acts as if she doesn't believe in it. Eventually, Jillian runs off to continue going through men and living her best life, which is all chaos and drinking and adventure, and Sally stays behind. Sally falls in love with a nice normal guy who loves her back and even wins over the aunts. They get married, have 2 daughters, and the town starts to accept Sally as normal. But then tragedy strikes. Her husband is killed, and Sally regresses into a deep depression. Jillian calls her and tries to help, but Sally pretty much just sleeps away a year of her life and then finally gets up and moves herself and her daughters out of the aunt's house into another part of the state. They settle into a normal neighborhood, and Sally gives her daughters what she always wanted, normalcy. Of course, they still go back to the aunts every summer for a month in August, and the girls are allowed to run wild and eat chocolate cake for dinner, etc., etc. Time passes. The girls grow up. Antonia is now 16 and beautiful, and Kylie is 12 and gawky. And then Jillian arrives in the middle of the night one summer with the body of her dead boyfriend in their car. Seems that they were living in Arizona, and he was selling drugs to college kids, and some of those college kids died. So they took off. And also, he was an abusive, sadistic piece of crap who hit Jillian and raped her and had a violent temper, so she had been dosing him with nightshade, as you do, in his booze for months to make him sleep. And as they were driving, he keeled over, and she is pretty sure it's because she had slowly poisoned him, even though she didn't really mean to, and she is very distraught. Sally decides that for safety reasons, they will bury the dead Jimmy in the garden near where the lilacs grow. So there you have it. Dead Jimmy buried in the backyard, but this is a magical realism book, so of course he will haunt them. The teenagers are dealing with their own stuff, and are unwitting pawns in Sally and Jillian's pleas for love and affection. Jillian helps Kylie cut and dye her hair when she turns 13, and va-va-voom, it is a very big deal. She looks great, but she looks adult, and Sally is understandably pissed off and hurt. Time continues to pass. Jillian is in love with and loved by a high school teacher named Ben, and she tries to rebuff him, even though they're both madly in love with one another. Sally is going nuts with the secret about the dead body in the garden, and the teens are both growing through their own special changes and growing up shit. They don't get along. Antonia is jealous of Kylie's new beauty. Also, they just start to drift apart. It's unsettling. No one knows how to fix it, partly because, again, the house is being haunted. It's a very long, strange summer. Oh, yes, Jimmy. Still haunting. This is very important. Haunting, 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 haunting. This happens through magic lilacs that grow and magically affect anyone walking by. Also, there's a toad that upchucks Jimmy's signature ring, which Kylie finds and tosses by the kitchen sink. Kylie, by the way, seems to have the gift of magic as well. She is the only one who can see and sense Jimmy out there in the garden. From afar, the aunts must know that Jimmy is haunting them because they send an oil painting of Maria Owens, the first witch in the family, which Kylie hangs over her bed, and Jillian's finally able to get some sleep. Sally has had enough of this haunting, and Kylie talking about the strange man in the garden. She cuts down all the lilac bushes. Jillian decides to give Ben a chance. Important note about Ben. He is a magician. The rabbit in the hat card trick kind of magician. Jillian bonds with his rabbit. And no, that's not a euphemism. She bonds with his magic wand, too. And yes, that was the euphemism. Anyways, Kylie has a crush on the teacher Ben, but she's finally given up that pipe dream and decides to make up with her former best friend, a dude named Gideon, that she sort of bailed on right after the disastrous haircut and drama. She bakes him a cake. She goes to take him a cake, and on the way to his house, she's followed by 2 assholes who really, really, really want to rape her. She escapes and goes to her sister Antonia for help. This near miss and trauma brings the sisters back together. Antonia has also started a very sweet relationship with a college boy and has matured a bit from the brat she was at the beginning of the summer. Okay, back to Jillian and Sally. Sally is pretty upset that her girls are growing up and not needing her so much. She attempts to do the whole climb back into bed and ignore the world thing, but Jillian will have none of it. Thankfully, she's able to snap Sally out of her stupor and tells her that she will be moving in with Ben. It is August now and time for Sally and her girls to go see the aunts. Jillian is pretty much a big, oh hell nope, to going and seeing the aunts, so she's going to stay behind. But wait, now we're getting a whole new random character in the middle of a paragraph. It's Gary! He's from Arizona, and he's here to find the missing Jimmy because those dead college students, oh, they're still dead. Someone needs to pay. Armed with a letter that Sally wrote to Jillian months and months ago, and falling in love with her through her writing, he shows up and is asking questions. It is love-lust at first sight for Sally and Gary. She magically cannot lie to him. Jillian, though, is all sweet and sugar and full of lies about how Jimmy's car got there to their house, and Gary isn't really buying it because he's in love with Sally and he's all mixed up, poor thing. He also finds Jimmy's ring by the sink. He takes off for his hotel and Sally follows him. They have a very dramatic conversation in the parked car in the rain, and Sally tells him the truth about what happened to Jimmy. Then they make out because, again, they have fallen in love. Back at the house, Jillian realizes that Jillian realizes that where the lilacs were is now a huge-ass thorn patch. Also, one of Jimmy's boots has appeared. Jillian tells the girls what happened, and a huge-ass storm starts to flood everything. Back at home, Sally tells Jillian she sent Gary away, even though she loves him, and she isn't sure what he's going to do with the info that they killed and buried Jimmy, and Jillian tells Sally that Jimmy is not staying buried. They decide to call the aunts. The aunts arrive with big, heavy suitcases, and it's page 260, and they finally get 2 personalities and some background info. Turns out that Jillian's dose of nightshade would not have killed Jimmy, so the whole thing was kind of for naught. They do a ritual involving lye and basically dissolving whatever's left of Jimmy. They dump it on the ground, and Sally has a few moments of seeing the rest of her life and how she will someday live in the desert, Arizona perhaps, and be happy. Basically, now there's an epilogue. Gary slips Jimmy's ring into an unidentified corpse, and he and Sally do indeed end up together. In fact, everyone pairs off, and there's a happy ending. And apparently the curse is never spoken of again, or something weird. I don't know. I feel like we forgot that there was a curse at the end of this book, but I will save that for later. The movie is pretty similar, but some key differences, and we will touch on them. But here we go. Maria Owens, a young witch, is exiled with her unborn child to an island in Massachusetts. When her lover does not rescue her, she casts a spell to stop herself from ever falling in love again, but the spell becomes a curse affecting all future generations of women in the Owens family. Any man who falls in love with an Owens woman will die. In the present, Jillian and Sally Owens are taken in by their maternal aunts, Frances and Jet, named pretty fast, and played amazingly by Diane West and Stockbridge Channing, but So, they have been taken in. Jillian's talents lie in charm and persuasion, while Sally is more gifted in witchcraft, like telekinetic and other such things. After witnessing their aunts cast a spell for a woman obsessed with having a specific man's love, Jillian is titillated at the idea of falling in love, and Sally is terrified. Sally casts a true love spell to protect herself, summoning a man who possesses qualities that cannot possibly exist. Pin in that. Years later, Jillian makes a blood oath to Sally, promising to return and leaves for Los Angeles. Sally marries Michael, a local produce seller, and they have 2 daughters, Kylie and Antonia. They plan to open a botanical shop, but Michael dies after being hit by a truck. Sally realizes that her aunts cast a spell so she would be happy, not expecting Sally's love to trigger the curse. Devastated, Sally and her daughters return to the Owens home to live. Sally decides that she and her daughters will not perform magic. As Jillian begins a relationship with Jimmy, she can feel Sally's grief, and realizing that Sally really needs her, she returns to Massachusetts. After Jillian helps her realize that she's neglecting her young daughters due to her disabling grief, Sally wakes to find her sister gone. It was like a one-night stand of fixing your life. With newfound resolve, she opens the botanical shop she'd planned with Michael and tries to help her daughters navigate living in a town where the citizens openly taunt them for being witches. The daughters, by the way, are young. Young. We can ask how old you think they are, but they're young. Okay.
Yeah.
Jillian calls Sally to come and rescue her after Jimmy becomes erratic and abusive. But after Sally arrives, he kidnaps them both. Sally puts belladonna into Jimmy's tequila, inadvertently killing him as he tries to strangle Jillian. Jillian decides that they must use magic to resurrect Jimmy so that neither of them will be guilty of murder. They return home, then resurrect him using their aunt's spellbook. Jimmy attempts to kill Jillian again immediately after being revived, and Sally is forced to kill him again, this time with a cast iron skillet. They bury his body in the garden. The sisters bond, and Jillian and Sally both use their magic. Jillian to help Sally get the coveted top slot in the mother's phone tree, and signs began occurring indicating that something is wrong. Yet they do not confess to their aunts. The aunts push them into finally telling all with the help of a spell and some tequila. Francis and Jet then leave after giving Kylie and Antonia protection words, telling Antonia to give Sally and Jillian the message to clean up your own mess. Investigator Gary arrives from Tucson in search of Jimmy, who is revealed to be a serial killer. Gary begins to suspect that Sally and Jillian killed Jimmy, so Jillian and Kylie and Antonia create a potion to banish Gary. However, the girls realize that he must be the man described in young Sally's true love spell, and they dispose of the potion. While watching the girls toss the potion-laden pancake syrup into the sea, which was a waste of some nice cockery, by the way, Gary and a horrified Sally and Jillian watch a frog regurgitate Jimmy's special signature ring. Gary takes it as evidence and departs, angry and confused. Sally goes to Gary's hotel room and insists that he record her testimony. While there, she sees a letter that she had written to Jillian just before rescuing her from Jimmy. She realizes that he must have read it many times. Yep, they have both fallen in love. Unable to deny their feelings for another, they kiss, and Sally realizes that he was there because of her love spell. Sally bolts, shaken. Returning home, Sally discovers that Jimmy's spirit has possessed Jillian's body, and Gary, following Sally, witnesses Jimmy's spirit emerge. Jimmy attempts to kill Gary by reaching into his chest, only to be hurt by Gary's silver star-shaped badge, and then he disappears. Sally tells Gary that he is there because of her spell, and the feelings they have for each other are not actually real. Gary replies the curses are only true if one believes in them, and then reveals that he also wished for her, and he says that he doesn't believe in the curse. And again, curses only have power if you believe in them. I think he's forgotten what just happened in the attic, but whatever. Okay, Jimmy possesses Jillian again and attempts to assault Sally, who knocks her out just before Francis and Jet return. Sally, realizing that she must embrace magic to save her sister, asks the aid of the mothers in the school's emergency phone tree, and they form a coven to exorcise Jimmy's spell, bringing their own brooms. Sally makes them stop when she sees that the effect is killing Jillian. Sally, inspired, opens the magic protection circle surrounding the possessed Jillian, entices Jimmy to assume control over Jillian's body, and then swiftly, Sally repeats the blood oath with Jillian, again slicing their palms to join their blood and promise. The Owens curse is somehow broken because of this, although that's only because Wikipedia says so. I didn't catch that in the movie, but fine, whatever. Jimmy's spirit is exorcised and permanently banished. Gary clears the sisters of any suspicions of wrongdoing in Jimmy's death by planting the ring on a different body. Sally comes to a decision, encouraged by Jillian to take a risk on love again. Sally sends a message via a leaf on the wind to Arizona. Gary senses her call and returns to Massachusetts to be with her. And Halloween is celebrated with all the Owens women, all 6 of them, demonstrating their powers by leaping off the roof, landing safely, dressed as witches, and are lovingly accepted by the townsfolk. The end. Holy crap!
So much to cover.
So much crap to cover! I mean, stuff. Yes, so much stuff. Cyndal, how did you come to this book and movie? Do you remember which you saw first or encountered first?
First I saw the movie.
Okay.
And
1998, so you, like me, would have been, what, a senior in high school or
a
freshman
senior in high school, but I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it on VHS. So,
for those children listening, VHS are large plastic ways that we used to watch movies.
Oh, youngins. Yeah, so I saw it on VHS. I think I rented it from Blockbuster, which is where you rented those big plastic rectangles. And I loved it. It was love at first view. And I thought it was so magical. And just like the whole...
So can I ask, were you already witchy at that point? Or this wasn't like the movie that...
This was not the movie that like turned me pagan. No, it definitely
That would
wasn't.
be Mists of Avalon, right? Or am I telling my story now? Okay.
It was Shakti Gwain's creative visualization, which was my first pagan-y book, which was more New Age, really, that really got me interested in the occult. And then in 5th grade when we studied Egyptian mythology and Greek mythology and all the multi-gods, and I thought, gee, it's too bad we're not allowed to believe in that anymore. And then later on I realized, oh, you can believe whatever you want.
That's
makes a lot more sense to me. So But really, Shakti Gwain's creative visualization book, which is not what we're talking about today.
But I will put it in the show notes for those of you who visit our website at pagesandpopcornpodcast.com.
That was my first. But when I watched Practical Magic, getting back to what we're supposed to be talking about, I just loved it. I loved it so much. And I watched it a million times. I think I rented it way too many times. I could have purchased it. And then I did purchase it. I have it not on VHS anymore, but I have it on DVD, not Blu-ray. But and I just loved it. I've watched it a million times. And then I loved it so much. And I loved the ants so much that I wanted more of the ants. That's what I really wanted. So that's when I came to the book. And when I first read the book, I hated it. I despised it. I was so angry because I wanted the movie in book form with extra ant stuff, and that is not what I got. And so I tossed it. I was like, this book is stupid. I do not like this book. But then when I reread it for this, I really was able to put it aside, knowing that it wasn't going to be exactly the same, and I enjoyed it a lot more. So I'm glad that you asked me to reread it, because I actually enjoyed it this time.
Oh, that's exciting. That's good to know. Yeah. So the movie came out. I would have been a senior in high school, freshman in college, somewhere around there. I kind of vaguely knew about it. I can't remember when I saw it or where I saw it, but I am like 90% sure that I saw this movie at some point before watching it recently. And I kind of feel like my thought was like, yeah, that's cool. That's fun and light and fluffy and pretend and whatever. Sure, like all of the women in this movie are like amazeballs. Mm-hmm. You know, Sandra Bullock is great, Diane West is great, Stockard Channing is great,
as always.
Nicole Kidman is great. The guy from ER, who's the bad guy, is great. Like, you know, like everybody's good. So this is fine. And then I really didn't give it much thought. And then I'd read other books by Alice Hoffman, who wrote Practical Magic, and enjoyed them. I really liked The Dove Keepers. And so Practical Magic had been on my list for a while, and I hadn't read it. And so I thought, well, Practical Magic. And people would have these large opinions. Oh, the book was awful. Oh, the movie was this or that or the other thing. So that's why it got put on our list. And then it's October. And so it's like, okay, time to read it. So I read the book for the first time. And my vague recollections of the movie sent me into this book thinking it was going to be light and fluffy, and it's definitely not. And so, but after a couple pages, I realized, okay, so this is different. And then I was able, like you said, to kind of put myself into the book place without, you know, leaving the movie behind. And I also really enjoyed the book.
Yeah.
It had some things I was kind of like, okay, whatever, roll my eyes. But that didn't diminish my enjoyment of the movie. And we will get to towards the end about our final thoughts of book and movie. But I will say that I'm definitely going into this conversation saying I'm very glad that we did this.
And I hadn't read any Alice Hoffman prior to this. I didn't even know she was a popular author before researching it after I read the book. I just wanted to know a little more. And so, yeah, I had no idea. And I liked the writing. There were some parts I was like, oh, I wish she hadn't used that phrase, or that sentence could use reworking. But it was good. I had no idea she was so popular or had written so many books.
Yeah, and I love her language. The book has really, I mean, I said at the top of my recap, it's very sensual, it's very poetic. There's not chapters, there's sections, and then the sections are just long, and there's no break. And that, it took me a little bit to get into, but I actually kind of like it because I feel like that was a narrative choice. It's life, you know, it just flows. One thing flows into another, and we don't have a end of a chapter and then a new chapter. That's not really how life, conversations, growing up, any of those things work. Everything just kind of melds together. And I definitely saw that as a symbolic choice about how the practical part of life and the magical part of life meld together. And so there's all this stuff like, you know, from what you grow in your garden to tossing your salt over your shoulder, all of these little things that, you know, are practical or magical, and they just meld. And I just thought that was a good choice.
And that's very pagan life, witch life. There's not like your mundane normal life and your magical life, and they're two completely separate things. Like if you're a regular practicing witch, it all it's just your everyday. It all melds together. And I thought that this book and movie showed that very well. Alice Hoffman is Jewish, and she wrote this book and the movie that is one of the most well-loved stories among pagans and witches. So it's kind of neat that she was able to hone in like that.
Mm-hmm. But while we're talking about the magic, I know that there's different types of magic, just like there's different types of witches and pagans. Mm-hmm. And I know you could probably talk for an hour and a half on just that question. So I'm going to keep you short. But can you talk a little bit about the type of magic that was represented in the book and the movie versus...
Yeah, the type of witchcraft that is practiced is part kitchen witchery, mostly combined with movie magic, obviously, in both the book and the movie. There's definitely parts of it that are like, oh, that's, Hollywood movie magic versus like everyday herbs and spelling your syrup, putting herbs in your syrup in the movie. That's very like magical on a practical level. But then like having the coffee stir itself is very magic, movie magic. Yeah, kitchen witchery where it's herbs and it's how you use the herbs on a magical level to change your future or your reality. That's all like real witchcraft type stuff.
I feel like in the book, you could almost say it wasn't real. Like, there's enough doubt or circumstance or coincidence that it's very like, okay, people believe in this, and so because they believe in it, it happens, and yada yada. There's a few cases where that doesn't quite work, but there's enough other places where you're kind of like, maybe this is real, maybe this is not real. But in the movie, it was obviously completely real from the get-go. Right. The very first scene, and I didn't touch on it, but like Mary Owens is being executed and they're hanging her and she magically gets free, and then there's telekinetic power, which is like shorthand for magic in movies, like you're talking about, the stirring and things flying around. There wasn't telekinetic powers in the book. The book didn't have that. Yeah. Even though the book was like magical realism, it kind of almost had less, quote, magic.
I agree. And then throughout most of the book, Sally is contradicting anything with her skepticism. So anything that happened, she would go back and say, well, that's not real, or that was just coincidence, or, that's just their imagination. And I think that for people that are looking at spells and witchcraft, that is a normal part of the experience. That's a big part of magic, is that what you're doing when you're doing magic is you're altering the energy that's going out. It's called in Hermeticism, it would be the law of rhythm, I would guess. But you're pushing the energy like a ripple in the water in a different direction to get the result that you want. So it's moving things in the direction you want compared to where it would just go naturally. And so it's going to look circumstantial. And that's why most pagans and witches are very keen on writing everything down. So you write down what you were trying to make happen, what you did, how you did it, what the results you're looking for. And then you go back and you look at the results, further down the line and see if that actually worked or happened. And then you always do that so that you have some sort of record to see if your magic is working or not. And it's not going to be like in the movie where Gary just looks up and goes, oh, I must go to Sally right away. It's going to be, the job I want just opened up, circumstantially when I did that job spell, 3 weeks ago, and now I can go apply for it and get it. So magic doesn't look like it does in the movies. It's much more circumstantial like that. And it's easy to discount. And that's why in the movie, she said something that was really good. It was, you can't practice witchcraft while you're looking down your nose at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was particularly good, like a good quote, because it's the same thing. You can't continue to say, oh, it's just circumstance. Oh, it's just, happenstance. And then discount what you've just done, especially when you're looking back and you've taken notes and you see that you have a history of things going in your direction after you're doing your spell work.
Or say, it's not real. Now I need it to be real. So now it has to be real.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
That
right.
picking and choosing of it's belief or not belief.
Right. And Sally, because she's scared or, because she has this need to be quote unquote normal, she discounts it. And then all of a sudden she needs it.
Mm-hmm.
And the aunts, I think, in the movie said something along the same line.
They say that in the movie. That line it's not in the book, but yeah, because the aunts, and we'll talk about that in a second. But okay, so that's the types of magic. And is there anything else you want to talk about the difference between the book magic and the movie magic?
Well, in the book, Kylie has the sight. So she can see auras, which is something that some people believe that they can do and see. And then she also is able to sense people's feelings. And she's also able to actually see Jimmy in the garden. Mm-hmm. And then in the movie, that's Antonia that can do that. And, in the book, Antonio kind of got screwed on her storyline.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Yeah. She's kind of a jerk, and then she's got nothing, and then all of a sudden she's
better now,
and she's got a boyfriend. Well, good for her.
Oh, well, that is really what all girls want, right? Just give them a boyfriend, and then they have a happy ending, and then it's fine.
Oh, and she feels pretty again. Isn't that sweet?
So nice, so nice. Because this is a feminist book. Okay,
and then but then. Kylie, so in the book, Kylie has that, and those are all things, maybe not all together like in the book, but those are things that people believe that they have the ability to do in real life. Some people feel like they can see auras. Some people feel like they are empathic, where they can feel people's emotions, and then some people feel like they have the sight, which is the ability to see people that have passed over. I don't know that very many people claim to have all three like that, but those are abilities that people claim to be able to do.
Right. And Kylie's were basically activated when she turned 13, it felt like, too. And so that was like this moment of, okay, now she's 13 and she cuts her hair and, whatever. Right. And then she transitions into womanhood. And so I definitely want to talk about how magic is tied into the feminine, right? Because I felt like that was a major part of this.
And isn't that such a 90s thing too? Like, didn't we go through that wave where it's like, oh, they're officially a teenager and they've gone from that gawky child and now all of a sudden they're adult and they've had this makeover and they're beautiful.
Well, she took off her glasses, so now she's beautiful.
Right.
She blew out her candles and now she's beautiful.
She got a blowout for her hair and all of a sudden she's great,
Definitely a 90s thing.
Yes.
But I did like the idea that the book seemed to, and I can't remember the 90s all that well. I was whatever. But but I do feel like the idea of, well, okay, it appeals to me as a queer feminist lady that when we have books about the women power and women, coming together and having a sense of women community and finding their inner power, whether that's magical or metaphorical, I like those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So the fact that it was like, okay, you're growing up and you're getting into your magic, that's cool. The fact that both Sally and Julian kind of had to tap into the good women power and not, but I feel like the book was kind of making some judgments about the good woman power versus the bad woman power. So I don't know if you are ready to talk about this, but I definitely want to talk about how the women are portrayed in the book and the movie, because we have Sally, who in both cases was the quote unquote good sister, right?
The older sister.
Well, yes. And also all she wanted was to get married and have babies and live a normal life. Right. Okay. Then we have the bad sister who wants to full on live life and have these adventures and go places and do things. And of course, it's also
little sister.
Right. It's wild and it's drinking and it's smoking and it's having lots of sex and like she's the bad sister, right? You know? and then how does she get fixed? In the book, she falls in love with a good man who has his own weird masculine magic that's not real because he's a magician. And then they bond and he loves her and she loves him and now she's going to be okay because she's freaking become the good domesticated. She has been tamed now.
Right.
And I don't like that.
In the book, that's much more the storyline for sure. And in the movie, I feel like the aunts go about that differently where they say, oh, Jillian has her own type of magic that she'll come into her own when she gets older. And when they're still children, I think they're like, what, 8 and 10 maybe.
About that age. When they say that, yes.
And then when they're drinking, you know, they talk about, you know, they're saying slut, but they're saying it in a, you know, funny, loving way.
Right. And we'll get to the drinking scene because I think that's important. But I do think that it's important to note that the movie took those ideas of the good and the bad feminine and they turned it on its head. And I love this. I love the fact that in the book, the aunts were sad because they had fallen in love with 2 boys who had died by getting struck by lightning. So there's a lot of lightning in the book, by the way.
Yes.
Anyways, so these boys are dead, so it's tragic, but the aunts loved and then were sad. So they have like their own love lost, blah, blah, blah. In the movie, they didn't really reference that. The aunts were pretty fine. They were fine. They were living their best lives with their awesome hats and their awesome house and all their stuff. And they were amazing.
Yes.
And so there's that dichotomy was different. And so then, and also Jillian had her thing with Jimmy, that whole thing, but then Jillian doesn't fall in love with another. She's single at the end of the movie and she's okay with that. Like she's empowered and she's there with her nieces and so I thought the movie did a much better job of fixing that little weird feminist foible that happened in the book.
But in the book, I do say I liked Jillian's progression in her own mind, though. Not the whole part with Ben so much, but in the fact that she went from needing to be in these toxic relationships to finally realizing that she doesn't need to be punishing herself. Like, I liked that part.
I liked it, except that to me it felt like she only got there because Ben had like the secret magical wand penis. Like, if it wasn't for Ben and his magical wand penis, which I swear I just like that phrasing now, like, it wouldn't, he is what fixed her.
Yeah.
She didn't get fixed on her own. She didn't really get somewhere on her own.
Yeah, the whole waking up and like curling up and bawling on his couch next to the rabbit thing was a little, you know, and then, I mean, it was good. I think the good parts of the Jillian in the book story had to do with like when she was talking about how she dealt with her abusive relationship and how she would talk dirty to Jimmy to get him excited so that he would focus his rage in these ways because she could handle that. And sex was her outlet and her weapon, and then then it became the thing that punished her because he was raping her, but then she was able to find good sex. I mean, it's just so mucky, and I just, like, her story of abuse is really tragic, and I just wish, I wish she had gotten to that place without Ben, without... Hoffman, she really wrote a good victim, like a domestic abuse victim. She really tapped into that really well, I think, especially like the coping mechanisms that she used. Maybe not the belladonna, but
the nightshade belladonna. But the way she would
she would cope, the way she would talk to him, the way she knew the tricks to keep him happy and not hitting her. Were very like realistic,
and he was much darker in the book than in the movie. He was an asshole in the movie, but not nearly to the level of in the book. And this is maybe jumping ahead a little bit too, but Roger Ebert had this great line about how the movie was too childlike for adults and too fairy tale or too dark for kids and too childlike for adults. Yeah. And I thought that was a good thing because it had these really funny moments, and then it kind of had this darker stuff too. And now, having read the book, it could have been so much darker.
Yeah.
All the humor in the movie was not in the book.
No.
There were no jokes in the book.
Yeah.
In the movie, there were sight gags and funny lines and, so they lightened it up to make it into this romantic comedy about, murder.
I have a funny story about that, actually. So, apparently, for the movie, the director hired a witch to come on the set and be a what do they call that?
Consult?
A consult, yeah, right. So, which is awesome. They did that in the craft, which is why the craft is so realistic in not the magic part, but in the ritual part. But for this movie, they did the same thing, except I think like halfway through, or maybe it was after. Some point during the filming, the witch that they had as the consult started demanding more money, probably because she saw it was going to be a good movie, right? But like double like what they were going to pay. So like a set of $150,000, it was $250,000 or something along those lines, right? So,
note to Hollywood, I'm available for about $75,000, just so you know. Okay.
So anyways, so she demanded extra money and the director was like, we don't have that in our budget. No, right? Normal. So then she was like, if you don't give me the money, I'm going to curse this whole movie. And they had like this big blow up where they had to be like, I'm sorry, you're going to curse us. You're not going to work on the movie anymore. And they had to get like the studio involved. And she ended up getting like some undisclosed amount of money to make her go away.
Oh my gosh.
Then, this is from an interview with the director. So, the director's like, well, then, the movie was cursed and it was going to do bad. So, in his words, this is not correct terminology. He then hired an exorcist to perform an exorcism, which is not what you do for a curse, but, and he spent hundreds of dollars on this exorcism, quote unquote, I'm doing finger quotes, not that you can see, to get rid of this curse. First of all, an exorcism is to get rid of being possessed by a demon or ghost, not to get rid of a curse. So really they needed like
a counterspell.
A counterspell or like a
cleansing ritual.
Something along those lines, right? They needed another witch. So he kind of got screwed on. They spent a lot of money on things that weren't very helpful. But his theory is that this was, people loved the movie, but in the media, it was touted as a flop, even though the movie made money. And even though people, it's a cult classic now, especially among pagans. But the
ratings are low.
The ratings are low, and the media touts it as low because of this curse. Is it interesting?
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, and I am available to consult, and I will not curse you. So I loved the ants in the movie. They were strong. They were secure in themselves. I loved the costume. Like whoever did the costuming for that movie for the ants, like deserves an award of their own. Such gorgeous dresses, like the parasols and just like, just everything was so cool. They were just, can Stockard Channing play anything other than a brilliant, strong woman? I'm not sure at this point.
No, from Rizzo to Mrs. Bartlett with a quick pass stop over here. Although I guess Mrs. Bartlett came after this, now that I'm thinking about it, because that would have started at the late 90s. But yeah, she's amazing.
Her. So just everything about them is phenomenal. I love them. In the book, they're shrill. They're really old and frail.
And tiny. And
they
are referred to as the aunts.
Yeah.
Until 260 pages of just the aunts. They're like a single entity.
Yes. And I think that's pointed out through Jillian too. Like Jillian says something like, I always associate them together.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until the end of the book where they come to where Sally's house is that she goes,
one of them's taller than the other.
One of them is taller than the other, right. And I guess we'll probably talk on this later, but the spell they do at the end is practically just lie.
Yeah. Cynthia's crawling into her chair in horror.
We should probably touch on that towards the end because it's the end of the book. But so the spell.
No, let's talk about it now. We're here.
Okay, so
they brought rocks, special blue rocks.
They brought special blue rocks, but they don't say what the rocks are. But they're large. They're they're the stones
from their garden
at the house, which. That I guess that makes sense because they were Mary Owens's stones.
Yeah. Somehow,
something from
when she showed up with nothing except the money in her skirt, she also had stones, but sure.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then like their special potion is practically just lie, which will kill anything, which isn't really magical at all. Maybe.
Oh, but Cyndal, a little random puff of red something floated out of the ground after they poured that on the ground, and that was his spirit, and then he just dissipated into the air. So, I'm sorry. Yes, I love this. That part was so bad.
Poor lie over. It's like they needed an ending to the book, but they didn't know. They're
what
like,
to do.
Oh, well, how do we get rid of Jimmy? Well, we'll just pour lie on him. That'll kill anything.
We'll put some stones, and then the creep factor is like other little girls in the neighborhood bring their dolls and have tea parties.
And then it's somehow good luck.
It's like good magic with those stones.
How is it good luck? All they did was pour lye over this dead body, which will kill anything. Like, of course they had to put stones on it. Nothing would grow there after they put lye on it. And then now it's good luck. How? Why? They didn't say anything. Like, there was no spell, was there?
I will say,
I don't remember that.
No, there wasn't. The movie's magic was very silly to me in a lot of ways, but I'm a sap. And I cried during the ritual at the very end of the movie when all the women get together. Okay, again, talking about women's power. So, like, this is a coven. Now, this isn't just our family magic. This is leaning on the women in our community because we cannot do it by ourselves. And empowered women empower women. And that's what we do as women, is we support each other. And they came with their brooms and their dustpans and their
dustbusters.
And they got in their circle. And you know what? Here's the thing. Like, they talked a lot about things have power if you believe in them. Those women didn't all believe, but they showed up. That was the thing.
They talk about that. I really like that part because when they first come in and they're in the kitchen and they're mixing something that, does smell bad, but it's obviously not lye because there's herbs and it's foaming and everything. It's obviously like a pot of potion of some sort.
And everybody has to go in and stir. She said everybody has to stir it.
And that makes sense because then you're stirring your energy into, each person is putting their own energy into the potion, which makes sense. And then the women are talking about their supernatural experiences, like the one woman that says, my daughter was at a sleepover and had a nightmare and I could hear her crying across town. Like, those are all experiences that people can relate to. Like, we all have those, where you're connected to someone that you love and it affects
somebody dies and you knew before the phone call happened.
Yes, exactly. Or, like in the movie where Jillian's calling on the phone and they both know it's going to be Jillian. Like, those are things that happen to people and they're supernatural, but they're things that happen. And then the women all bringing brooms. This is where I'm glad they had a consult on the movie, whether, she turned out to be crazy or not, but there's a lot of like symbolism there. So brooms, or besoms as they're called in witchcraft, they're used for protection and cleansing and purification. You see, pagans have them on their walls or near their doors or like laid across the threshold because they prevent curses. They keep negative energy from being sent into the house. And when they're holding hands, it's creating an energy flow between them. And, the women in the community, when they're all holding hands together, that's creating a connection between them that was able to, break the curse. But that's when you're in circle doing, a ritual with other people, you do that. You hold hands like that to create energy that flows between you. So that was That was a good real part, even though it was make-believe with the bright lights and like Nicole Kidman being lifted off the ground and everything. But the part with, the symbolism of the brooms and the holding hands, those parts were parts that are actually practiced in witchcraft today.
I loved it. I love the sense of community. You can't always get out of a bad thing by yourself. You need help from other people.
Yes.
And, if you've ever been in an abusive relationship,
Yes.
some people can escape by themselves, but most of us needed help from somebody
Right.
else who's willing to help us. And that's where community comes in.
Right.
And yes, not all community is, it's not just women community, but I feel women community is a very special and potent and powerful thing. And to have a sisterhood of other women and to have those relationships is key into lots of stuff. So I love that was built into it. And then at the end where they were accepting Sally and her daughters. And it was okay to have the magic now because it's harmless and it's good and we love them.
Right.
And even though, was it Antonia? I think it was Antonia gave the boy chicken pox in the movie, which hilarious. But
I like that scene too because, it was a good learning experience for where she goes, we do not interfere in other people's lives. We do not curse other people. We don't cast on other people. That's an important part of witchcraft where, you have to be careful if you're involving yourself in other people's lives without their permission. That a morality thing that we struggle with in our craft. So.
And that gets into the idea of like, as it does no harm, do as you will, right?
Right.
So, yeah. Which brings me to something, it's a little bit further on my list, but Newton's third law of attraction, which is to every action, there's always an equal and opposite reaction. And I found that made a lot of sense. So here's a quote I actually got, and this will be in the show notes. Is it possible that the laws of physics apply to magic too? Again and again, in the course of these pages, attempts to control and manipulate have unintended consequences and invariably backfire on the instigators. The lovesick end up sick of love, the seers cannot see their own future, and what's buried, no matter how deeply in the ground, metaphorically or not, rises to the top. And I just thought that was really interesting.
I love that. And then in Hermeticism, there is also the law of cause and effect, where it says that when you do magic, you have to accept the consequences, whether intended or unintended, of the magic that you do. So the energy you put out, whether the results are your responsibility, whether you had intended those results or not, which is why you have to look at every angle before you do any magical work.
Which gets us into the be careful what you wish for kind of a thing.
Yes.
Well, okay, so one of the major differences, besides all the magic and the characterization, from a plot standpoint, the major difference between the book and the movie is the actual murder.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. In the book, he keels over in the car and she drives to, Sally's to get help because now there's a dead body in your car. And she's convinced that she's the reason he's dead because she had been dosing him for months and months and months.
Right.
Okay. Turns out, wasn't her. If she had then just taken him to a hospital, like, the whole thing would have been avoided. They would have been he's dead. And then they would have done an autopsy and been like, yes, he had a heart attack or whatever the thing. Right. It had nothing to do with you and the end.
Right.
So this gets into sometimes we make our own drama.
Right.
I feel like the lesson here maybe is go to the hospital. I don't know. Like, don't automatically assume the worst.
Right.
Because, okay, so then like this whole thing. So then they bury him and they have their whole thing. In the movie, we have two deaths. We have... First of all, there's a kidnapping happening because they're trying to escape and he's not going to let them escape. And then he's ringing. Then he's about to brand Julian.
Yeah.
I mean, like they've gone out of their way to make him, he's a serial killer in the movie, not just a guy who sold bad drugs to college kids.
Right.
I mean, they amped up his worstness, but also didn't show us his darkness. It's a weird change, but okay, fine. So now she's dosing him with Belladonna in the movie Nightshade. Can you speak to the difference between those?
There's not a difference. It's just a difference in name.
Okay, I wondered about that. Okay. So anyway, so she's dosing him and whatever, and then he passes out, or he dies, while he's trying to strangle Jillian. So, okay, so now he's dead. Okay, he's dead. we have to bring him back, that's a pretty big ass leap, especially.
They didn't talk about that.
No.
In the book.
In the book, there was no, we can bring people back. No. You know, when Sally's husband died, she didn't go to the aunts and beg them to bring him back.
But that's very, like, movie.
It is. Yeah. And the whole idea, if you bring them back, they'll be different. But, like, also, so then, like, you're like, okay.
The grimoire.
Right. So then.
Gorgeous, by the way.
But also not in the book. We didn't,
Yeah.
They didn't have a spell. They didn't need a spell book.
Like
they just knew. Okay, so fine. So now we've got this magical book. Now we've got this thing. Okay. So now we're gonna bring him back from the dead. So now we get into, we're gonna use whipped cream as the star on his,
That is so modern day paganism, though. You use whatever you can find. Like, this whipped cream, that will work. It's white. It works. It's right. White. And then she takes the lick of it. I'm like, that is so, like, yes, that would definitely happen today.
It's such a great melding of, like, old and new and modern and ancient. Yes. And, okay, so, but also it steps up almost the slapstick aspect of it, you know?
It lightens up a very dark moment.
Right, okay. Yeah. And then, because we're going from whipped cream licking to needles in the eyes. Like, practically in the same breath, right? Okay. And then I wasn't quite sure if they were supposed to stick those needles in his eyes or not, because they don't. They have them, like, right there at the edge, and then his eyes pop open.
Right.
So then I was watching this with a friend of mine, and she goes, do you think if they'd stuck the needles in his eyes, he wouldn't have been evil? Like, you know what I mean? Or it would have worked differently or something? I don't know. So he comes back. Basically, for Jimmy, he has lost no time. He was in the middle of killing Jillian, and now he's still in the middle of wanting to kill Jillian.
Right.
Okay. So maybe he came back as something not the same, or maybe not. Maybe that was pure on
just
Jimmy,
him.
you know? Whatever. So now we're going to bring him over the head with a frying pan.
All over Rapunzel.
I really feel like we should have a segment where somebody comes on and tells us about the legality of this. Because I feel like dosing somebody in a car is different than smacking them in the head with a skillet. But in both cases, there's a case to be made here for self-defense.
Justifiable homicide.
Yes. Again, why would we not call the cops and be like, hey, this guy was attacking us. I mean, at this point, you could even said, we all drove here together because we're friends. And then he decided that he was mad at Jillian and he started strangling her. So I hit him in the head with a pan and I'm so sorry. Oh, the stuff on the counter. Oh, I'm just making brownies. See, there's whipped cream. Like, do you know what I mean? But no. Let's bury. Again, I just...
And doesn't that, I think that's talked about a little bit in the book too. And it's implied in the movie that Sally takes everything on. She feels like she has to, and this is such a oldest child thing where she feels like she has to take care of everything, be responsible for everything, and just handle it instead of letting the authorities handle it.
Or asking for help. And see, then we have her lesson in the movie is that then the coven, the other women show up to help, and she gets help from the aunts. The book, we don't really have that lesson learned.
No.
So, yeah. Unfortunately. So, one of the things I liked the most about the movie was this sense of community. We just don't get that in the book. Okay, so fine. So now he's, whatever. And then we have the way he haunts is very different in the movie and the book. I actually really liked the haunting in the book better because it was scarier. It was like doors shutting and things missing and people
I think it was a little more
snappy.
Realistic. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're into the whole, being haunted thing, that would be a more realistic way of, as far as evidence that we have in the real world, that it would be more cold rooms and, shuttering windows and slamming doors and things like that, where in the movie, they had to make it for the movie. So it's an actual apparition that's that is so coming out of the body with that
CGI. It was so bad. Yes. So bad.
But it was so good when it was first released.
God.
That's the hard part about watching old movies.
It is. Okay, so in another major difference is in the movie, Sally makes this spell. She's going to conjure up a man who doesn't exist as the only man she'll truly love, so that she can't fall in love. Of course, then she falls in love with her husband. She genuinely loves him.
From a spell.
But okay. So then, but as a child, so I love this. As a child, she's like, I'm going to make a man who doesn't exist.
Yes.
He is going to love stars. Okay. And his favorite color is this. Okay. And he's going to have one blue eye and one green eye. And you're like, that's uncommon, but it happens. It's not like you said one red eye and one yellow eye. I mean, there's probably an albino
and then
out there somewhere.
shows up, right?
I'm sorry, and he's tall and he can flip pancakes. And I'm like, girl, I can flip pancakes and one of my eyes don't work. Like, come on. Like,
Right, but if you're like a 9-year-old.
I know. She was little, so.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay, fine. Fine.
Right.
So then, of course, like the star, and I thought they did a kind of a good job, like that, because they introduced it, it was a through line, and like, of course, he's got the star because he's a lawman, and like, that's his thing. And they talk about symbols only have power when you give them to him. So like, she even says to him, you have your badge. Your badge doesn't stop the bad guys. It's the power behind your badge.
Right.
And I really liked that idea. It just falls apart because he's like, I don't believe in this stuff. I literally just saw a ghost and my star saved it, but I don't believe in stuff. Like,
there's so much going on there. First of all, I would like to say that spell that she does to like bring like the man that doesn't exist is amazing. And I would recommend that to anyone. Like anybody that's looking for like a partner, make the list, like make that list of things you cannot live without, and then like, light some candles and make it special. Like, don't be disturbed and sit there and say, what are the things that, I can't live without? I want someone that has one green eye and one blue eye, or someone who flips pancakes, or, whatever you want that to be. And then whenever you come across someone, match it up to that list. And then what you can't live without.
And this works for other things too. Like, I had a friend who was trying to decide whether or not she should leave her husband.
Right.
And we did the same thing. We made a list. What are the most important things for you in your life? What do you want in your life? And what do you want your partner to give you? And then make a list about your current husband. Does he match any of your shit? Like at all? Is there overlap? Is there a Venn diagram or no?
Yeah.
And if he were to make a list about what he wanted in his life and what was important to his part, would you be on his list? Like, do you guys have similar goals and aspirations? So, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Whether you make that a magical experience or not is up to you, but it's definitely something that could be morphed into a spell like is done in the movie. Second of all, the star is a major player in paganism. Mm-hmm. It represents the 4 elements and spirit. In paganism, it has a circle around it to symbolize the interconnectedness of all the elements. It's called a pentacle.
We just talked about this at the...
or pentagram, rather.
We just talked about it and you can read more about it on our website because of the Da Vinci Code. Lots of pentacles and pentagrams over there, and a whole little blurb and like pictures and crap. Okay.
So, and then in paganism, the pentagram is used often as a ward against negative energy. So in the movie, like, it was clever that the star was, scarred Jimmy when he touched it because he was evil, he was negative, and then that was protecting Gary. Mm-hmm. Like, I almost said Glenn. It's Gary. And so, like, that was a good part of, witchy symbolism that was stuck in the movie.
Right. But also he didn't believe in it.
But he didn't believe in it. Yeah, so that part, that was contradictory because he's saying he doesn't believe in it, but you need to believe in order for those things
that star
to work.
Wouldn't have not worked on the apparition of Jimmy up in the attic if Gary hadn't believed in at least a little bit. Like, that was part of the whole point.
But I guess he believed in the power of the star as far as like it protecting him. So he's going to believe.
But see, that gets into like the cherry picking. I believe in my magic star, but I don't believe in your family's curse. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. And like, speaking of the curse, the book just kind of forgot about the curse. Like, what the hell's going to happen to Ben? Yeah. And Gary and all the other boys, because everybody gets a boyfriend in the book. Yes. But now the curse is just gone somehow. And in the movie,
I don't know that it's gone.
Well,
they might all die later next year.
Apparently, there's more books in this series. So yes, maybe.
Oh well,
maybe they have to break the curse later. But like, nobody's even concerned about the curse. I guess like after Sally's husband Michael dies, then there's no more concern about the curse, and that's because you would think if you were Sally and you're like, maybe you believe, maybe you don't, and then you've got daughters. Like, maybe you'd be like, hey, girls, this is a thing. Like,
Yeah.
could you be a lesbian? I know you can't have a lot of choice, but like, maybe if you fall in love with women, we could just sidestep this whole people that you love die
I guess
business.
It is very specific that
Men!
it's for men.
It's
right.
because heteronormative, man.
90s.
We should all just become
Yeah.
lesbians. That would solve all of our...
lesbians were just getting to be okay then.
Yeah.
So
If this book was written now...
wasn't mainstream.
Wasn't. No. Whatever. Anyways, but in the movie, they do their thing. The white light happens. Jimmy's gone. According to Wikipedia, this broke the Owens curse of the women. Okay. Because Wikipedia says so, but
in the movie?
That's what it says.
I think in the movie it broke because the townspeople, like, came together.
So that's
and
what broke
became friends.
So men will not die for loving them anymore because they now have their community support?
Yeah, because the townspeople are no longer against them.
I feel like it's very muddy.
It is a little muddy because it was, I think maybe
and nobody
because
said,
the townspeople
look,
were going to hang her, and then they're
they
not going to like try to kill them anymore. Did you notice though that the charm that the girls are wearing are pieces of the rope from Mary's
yes
noose?
Yeah, they pulled it out of the Mary's.
I thought that was clever.
They called it Mary's rope or something like that. It was an actual name for it. Yeah,
let's not use that very often.
But I did think it was also interesting that the aunts left. They were like, clean up your own mess. But then they were obviously somewhere and they're like, yeah, it's not going so well. We better show back up. We got here almost in the nick of time.
Right.
You know?
I like that. They're like, we must be getting old. We almost didn't make it.
We almost didn't make it. Yeah, for sure. So it's like kind of like that letting go. And in the book definitely was a coming of age for everybody. Everybody grew, except for the aunts. But everybody grew and changed and became something. In the movie, we really didn't see that. But the idea of your parental unit going away and letting you struggle and try to fix your own problem, especially a problem you created.
Right.
Let's not be, you know, it's a good thing.
I think that's something that as parents, you know, and their parental types that you have to do. I don't know that I would have waited until they were adults like that.
Right.
I don't know.
Yes. Some things need to be taught younger, but
maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of townsfolk, I wanted to point out that the townsfolk all being scared of them and calling them names and all that, that's like very normal. Like that's something that happens a lot. Like people are scared of what they don't understand. And so a lot of people are scared of witchcraft and scared of paganism as a whole because they don't really understand what it's about.
Right.
You know, they think it's devil worship. And I think it was good in the movie where Sally goes, oh, there's no devil in the craft, because there is no devil in the craft. I thought it was good that in the movie they're like, oh, everybody's scared because they don't understand her. And I think that it was Aunt Frances that says that, you know, people are scared of what they don't understand. And I thought that was a good part.
Yeah. And once they invited all the women in and showed them, you know, what it was, then it was better.
Yeah. We didn't talk about the house.
Yes. Okay.
So in the movie, the house is gorgeous. Like, I love the house. Most people of my persuasion love the house. Like, it's almost like a character of the movie. Like, it's such its own thing. The set designer left this movie and became an interior designer because people loved that house so much and wanted it recreated in their home so much. So she's like a designer for like super wealthy people. In the book, it's very different. Like, the house is black, the fence is black, the windows are like the green glass and covered over, and it's dusty except for like the
parts that Sally cleans.
The part that Sally cleans, and the banister is never dusty, which I thought was cute. It's a little spell on the banister for whatever reason, but they're always up like on the dusty stairwell with the picture of Mary Owens that nobody ever notices. But it's
and the house is light.
Gorgeous.
It's light and beautiful in the movie.
Yes,
as are the aunts. Like, I feel like it was a cognizant choice to be like, okay, witches already have this negative thing, but our movie is light and fluffy, and we're gonna light and fluffy up everything.
Yeah, and it's very like East Coast, like magical sort of
And we're right here by the water.
Right, yeah, exactly. But in the book, they talked about like having no clocks and no mirrors, and that's very pagan because no clocks creates a space without time, and they're very, in their own world. Now, like if you do a ritual now, you don't have any phones with you when you're in circle because you're creating a space without time. The mirrors are considered gateways to other planes, or like a portal that you can let other entities into your home. And so, it was just good writing that she didn't have any mirrors in the home. And also from, a womanly standpoint, I guess, is that you're not constantly looking at your reflection. You're not focused on your appearance. You're more focused on your internal work, I guess. Mm-hmm. Oh, and then for the townsfolk, blaming them for everything. That's happened.
Yeah, since women were in the woods with the herbs.
Yeah. The field crops died. Oh, my cow sneezed. Oh, she's a witch.
It's the same thing of, blaming the midwife when the baby dies. Right.
Exactly. And even for people who don't, quote unquote, don't believe in witchcraft, but then as soon as something bad happens, it must be, that witch's fault.
I do want to talk about the spell of the margaritas in the movie. So the aunts wake them up in the middle of the night because they're making margaritas. And first of all, they must have put a spell on the girls to sleep through it because those ladies were noisy. Okay. Second of all, the girls knew what margaritas meant. That meant, like, they heard the blender and they knew, and they both got excited before they even went downstairs. So you're like, okay, so this has happened before. But if you watch it, you're like, okay, they're drinking margaritas. They all get a little bit drunk. The aunts get some answers.
Right.
But the aunts were they were chanting and saying these things as they were putting the stuff into the blender. And it almost sounds like they were making like a cauldron-y thing. But then, of course, it's the margaritas. And I was like, oh, that's funny. They're pretending like they're casting a spell. Then you watch the scene and you're like, nope, they were casting a spell because it was like Tourette's. They were like spilling things and saying things they didn't mean to say. And you could tell Stalker Channing, sober, stone cold, but like playing with them. Do you know what I mean? To get them to the point where they would say what had actually happened and to finally speak the truth and to push them on that. And I just thought that was a really great melding again of the practical and the magic when you have somebody who won't tell you the truth, and sometimes liquoring them up is the way to get it. And
because you're much more loose-lipped when you have a little alcohol in you.
Right, exactly. And so I just thought it was just great. I love that scene so much. I thought it was just really, really, really well done.
Right.
And
the whole of them singing the song that Jimmy was singing, You Were Always on My Mind.
You're always on my mind. Yes. You're always on my mind.
And that's much, very much an empathy or thing or an empath thing rather, where they were pulling the energy from the bottle and catching on to what was going on. So really, because they were drinking the margaritas too, so they were pulling information, whether from the girls or from the situation in the air, as well.
Yeah. It was well done.
Did you want to talk about the sparrow? The sparrow wasn't in the movie, but it was a part of the book. So in the book, the sparrow comes into the house every year, no matter what they do. The handyman comes. First of all, everybody's scared of them, but they can still get a handyman to come to the house.
Certainly.
I thought that was weird. I was like, wow, that's pretty good. So they get a handyman. They close up every, hole that they could find, but the sparrow still comes in and circles around the dining room 3 times. And it's supposed to symbolize having trouble for the next year. So it's one sparrow, even though a sparrow actually symbolizes protection in numbers. And they're flock birds, which is why it's production numbers, and they travel together. So when you see a sparrow alone, it's caught your attention. I would imagine this would be due to needing to find your flock or being separated from your flock. And then the bird circles 3 times. 3s are about communication. So it makes sense that at twilight, which is, a time of sorrow, and one sparrow and circling 3 times. So when they say, oh, it equals trouble, that kind of makes sense. But if they were real witches and they knew like the symbology, which symbology plays a large part in the craft, they would have just said, oh, yep, another year of trouble. They would have seen, something more along the lines of like, yep, we're still not working together. We're still not talkingly open with each other because birds are communication. And, so here comes another year of trouble for us Owens women until we get our act together. It was so close to being good. And then, the bird hearts and the needles in the birds.
Well, okay, so the aunts in the book, their magic is less kitchen witchy. It felt to me, as a not kitchen witchy person exactly, but more voodoo almost, with like stabbing this dove in the heart with a needle and, these things and these charms and etc. Yeah, and also the town needed them, like the women would come to them, but they didn't want to acknowledge it. Right. So it was like a weird dichotomy also, the shameful thing.
Yeah, it's like they earned part of their income through this
enterprise
that they had.
And making the black soap that they sold to fancy people for lots of money, which of course...
Well, like apothecary work is very popular among...
It just made me think of Fight Club, and I was like, Tyler Durden and the aunts making soap. Anyways, the birds and stabbing the birds. And then Sally was a vegetarian, and they left all of that out of the movie pretty much. I mean, they had her stab the bird in the movie, but we didn't really get the repercussions of stuff in the movie the way we did in the book. Like in the movie, we had the woman come and she stabbed the bird and the girls were horrified. But we didn't get the second part of that where the guy she had the spell on followed her around until the day he died and drove her absolutely insane.
So much so that she became mute.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then be careful what you wish for.
I feel like that's one of the lessons here.
Yes.
Is the be careful what you wish for. Yeah. And I feel like the other lessons would be don't piss off a witch.
Yeah.
If you want to make something that doesn't exist, be more creative than 2 different color eyes. But that's maybe...
Well, modern-day pagans generally do not condone animal sacrifice. I just wanted to throw that out there. It's frowned upon in general practice, although it did happen by witches and other religions throughout history. It's also a great scene to consider how everyone's going to be affected by a spell, including yourself. Again, looking at all angles and considering all aspects before you put something out there like that. I think she said, I want him to desire me so much that he can't stand it. Or something along those lines. Like, that's horrible.
Right. You're putting pain on someone.
Right.
And let's not forget he was married. I'm just, she wanted another man's wife. It wasn't even...
Yeah.
And that's shitty. So women, don't steal, don't...
Oh, the Death Watch beetle. Yeah, so that's a thing.
That is a thing.
That's a superstition that is an actual thing. It's their mating call, but it does supposedly forecast approaching death. Apparently, it's from people that were watching over people that were going to die anyways, and then they would hear the beetle, and then they died. So... I don't know. It's kind of coincidental, but apparently that's a real superstition.
Roger Ebert said, one day Sally hears the Death Watch beetle beneath the floorboards. Desperate, she tears up one floorboard, then another. How does this work? Your husband lives if you squish the beetle in time? Soon she's torn up the entire floor, a job that would take union carpenters hours, if not days, and is not necessary because anguish can actually be demonstrated by the manner of which you tear up floorboards, not by how you tear them up and how many you're able to get through. The extra floorboards, like the extra songs in the movie, are overkill. And it was a good visual, but yeah, it did kind of what are you trying to do? I
think it showed her desperation, though.
It did.
Even though she knew that if she did find the beetle and squish it, it wasn't going to change, the omen that she received.
Right.
But she was just desperate to do anything.
Which was different from her mother, because we saw her mother in the beginning of the movie, heard it, the Death Watch beetle, and then just looked sad, and then that was the end. We didn't get the desperate of that.
Yes.
And so...
then she just died of a broken heart.
She died of a broken heart, which in the book, the parents died because a fire got started because of frickin' lightning, right? There was lightning and then a fire, and then...
Yeah, and they were so in love with each other that they never even smelled the smoke and got out. They just perished making love to one another.
I think maybe another little lesson here is, smoke detectors. And avoid lightning. Stay inside when there's lightning.
Right.
And, maybe be careful about love. I feel like there's the all-encompassing love that, rules you. And that is maybe not the best kind of love. Maybe the better kind of love is the more quiet, mature companionship love. Although, I don't know. Maybe the book isn't saying that because nobody seems to get that. Everybody has the...
Right. Well, okay, that there's some symbolism that kind of leads to that. So in the movie, the flowers that grow are roses.
Yes, not lilacs.
And yeah, in the book, they're lilacs. So roses signify just romantic love, right?
Mm-hmm.
But lilacs are that first emotion love and, that new relationship energy that is like intoxicating and crazy making and like infatuation driving. That I thought that in the movie and the book, he was infatuated with her. And especially that scene where he wants to even go with her to the bathroom because he's so infatuated with her. And so the lilacs growing were good symbolism.
Was it because he was infatuated with her, or was it because he was a control freak?
Yes. Can it be both?
I think it was, and that's why she drugged him so she could go see her sister and then get back before he noticed. By the way, the cinematography, the visual effect of her driving and the time changing, the time lapse was just beautiful. Some of the shots in this movie were just very, very beautiful.
Yeah.
The things that they did with light
and the soundtrack,
and it's beautiful. The soundtrack I found a little cloying. I'm with Roger Ebert. I feel like it was a little too much of the telling us what we were supposed to feel based. Literally, the song before they have their big epic kiss, Sally and Michael, is the song by Faith Hill called The Kiss.
Yeah.
And like as it starts, you're like, oh, someone's about to get kissed. Like, I don't know, whatever, fine. But the lighting I thought was beautiful in this movie. That was because we didn't see him abuse Jillian really until he was trying to kill her in the car. It was, and whatever. We didn't have that foundation. So what we had was that he was controlling and she needed to get away from him.
Yeah, you had that, I think, from the music and also just from the tone and his acting.
Yes.
That you see that he's like dominant and dark and controlling. And, he puts the blindfold over her eyes, without her without asking her, without her giving any sort of consent.
Pretty into it.
But she was into it, but
they were making the eyes while she was dancing with other guys and then making the eyes at him and what it was again, the book did a much better job of fleshing out that abusive relationship and how you get into that and then how you get trapped in that.
Right.
And the movie kind of had to speed through it.
And at the time, they weren't really having, conversations about consent like we are now.
No, definitely not.
Oh, toads.
Lots of toads.
Toads are agents of transformation. So when you see the symbology there is, how a toad, they go from like the egg to the tadpole to the frog, and they completely change their shape through that transformation as they grow into adults. And so in symbolism for paganism, they're agents of transformation. So I thought it was neat to see that, where in the book there's toads there too, but in the movie it was neat where the one toad spits out the ring, and then the story changes. Like, oh, now we have to deal with the death of Jimmy, and we all know he's there. And then
there was a bunch of toads when they dumped something out, and a whole bunch of toads came out, and then the girls gathered them up and dumped them over the fence.
The chair, when she's roped, Jillian is possessed and roped into the chair, and they move the chair and all the frogs are underneath. And I think that probably they're saying, okay, Jillian's got to change.
Right. Well,
something's got to change.
The grossy, because
plus it's gross.
They're gross. Yeah, they're just gross.
Blah. The blood oath thing. Why did they were already siblings? Okay, so in the movie, this happened in the movie and not in the book. But
I think it was because the audience, they have to dumb things down and make it really easy to follow. So they're going to separate the girls who have been together their whole lives.
Right.
And Jillian's going to go off on her life adventure. And so they symbolically cut their hands in the wrong place, by the way.
Yes.
And then they touch their hands together, which also is how you get hepatitis. And then they're like, okay, here you go.
Right.
My blood, your blood. We're bound together
forever. But they already share.
But
blood.
That was the thing, because then when she needed her, she looked at her hand, and then the other one looked at her hand. Yeah. So that was their connection point.
Yeah, I guess
it was just, I think, reaffirming it so that the audience could follow. And then at the end, we had that beautiful, because then she slices her hand again. So now we've got, the parallels and we touch your blood, my blood.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, from the 90s, and also because I'm a huge Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, like, your blood, my blood, that's a Buffy Dawn moment. Right before the sacrifice. What's in your blood, runs through your veins. It's Summer's blood, and we're related and connected, and blood magic, and like, plus they were young and stupid, and that's a thing with kids do, pinky promise and blood oaths and yada, yada, yada.
Okay.
I will say that I did think it was, like, very unhygienic because she used her dipshit boyfriend's...
Old, nasty...
Yeah.
Ew,
oh, I know. Yeah. Toss me your knife.
Yucky.
Oh. He's a boy. He uses that to clean under his nails. He probably has pried gum off of shit with that. But yeah, go ahead. Stab yourself in the hand.
Yes. Oh, I hope you clean that wound, girl.
Sally did. I don't know about Jillian.
They don't show the neosporin afterwards.
Or the infection.
Right. Oh, my connection to my sister's really green.
And oozy.
Ew.
Oh, and then forever after someone's reading your palm and you're like, oh, I see herpes in your future. Something green and oozy.
Yeah, gross.
Sorry.
Your lifeline's really been cut short. But bump.
Oh my god. Okay. So
you can't really bring people back from the dead.
No.
Sorry.
No.
Oh, the solstice?
Mm-hmm.
When the ants are like, oh, we can't skip solstice, we're on the committee. That is so pagan. that is like, obviously, like, it was, I'm sure that was not written into the original script, and like the consultant was like, I'm on the committee, and they're like, oh, we're going to use that because it had to have come from an actual witch. That is like a very pagan thing. And then dancing naked under the moon. Oh, of course, it's always optional. Very pagan, all true, made me laugh out loud. The blood moon.
Mm-hmm. And the ring around the moon. And
they don't really talk. They show the ring around the moon, but they don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the blood on the moon is supposed to be bad luck. Really, it's not. I mean,
it's called pollution.
Some people say it's, it's eclipse thing. It's, nowadays in the city it's pollution. And then the extra ring, really, it's supposed to indicate that it's going to rain soon. But,
clouds.
So there is
the reflection of the light around the clouds. But yes. Okay.
So general superstition says if there's a ring around the cloud, or a ring around the moon, it's going to rain soon. But there is that little rhyme, ring around the moon, trouble coming soon.
Right.
It's a thing, but it's not it's not really like a well-used thing. Like it's old superstition.
Right. And maybe the trouble is just that it's going to rain and cancel that picnic.
And in that scene, I think it is rainy, like the asphalt's all wet. It's overcast, like it had been raining.
Yeah.
So that, anyways. Oh, but Jillian wants her tiger's eye when she sees the blood moon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that is very pagan because tiger's eye properties are good luck and perspective and helps relieve anxiety and to rebalance yourself if you're into crystals. So if she was into crystals, she would definitely want her tiger's eye when she saw the blood on the moon.
Although, if she had just gotten in the fucking car and
The
not
taxi,
gone back for the tiger's
right?
eye, she would not have gotten kidnapped.
Yes. Now, I only noticed this when I watched this movie this last time, but the car they're trying to get into is like a taxi. So like the taxi driver
didn't notice. I thought I thought Sally had a rental car.
It looked yellow. Maybe it was the reflection of like...
I was very confused because she said something about like, I'm going to catch a thing, and I wasn't sure, are you catching a shuttle? Are you catching a plane? It's also the same night. Where did you go? Because it took Jillian a while to get there, and I didn't feel like she and Jimmy were traveling. Like, I was very confused about where things were. And there was on an island, right? They talk about them living on an island, or like going to an island, or being on an island, but then like, there's no ferry mentioned, so is there a bridge? I don't know, you guys, like, but this gets into that whole like suspension of disbelief. You're like, yes, kidnapped.
You just kind of have to get over some of those parts. I'm
sure someone knew.
Oh,
they just didn't bother to put it in the movie for us to know too.
Those little details, you don't need to know that. Just know that they got back.
Right.
Right.
Without
That's the
all
important
the rest
part.
of her stuff or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like then
Well,
they
she
were just...
traveled a lot, so she probably didn't have a lot of stuff.
Well, but she put her bag in whatever car Sally, and then Sally's purse also, and then they go back, and now they're... So then, like, did he say, okay, I'm going to kidnap you, but get all your stuff, put it in this trunk.
Right.
Like...
You never saw Sally canceling her credit cards.
Oh, seriously. Well, so then, like, when they're pulled off the side of the road, I was watching this with a friend of mine, Amy, and she goes, why don't they just drive away? And I said, well, if he's a smart kidnapper, he would have taken the keys with him. And then he gets in the car, he's got the keys. And I was like, yeah, so there you go. Like, that made sense to me. So a few things, but not all the whatever. Anyways.
Let's see. Oh, when they're doing the spell to bring Jimmy back, they are using Hecate. They
invoke Hecate.
They invoke Hecate, but they call her Hecate.
They say it wrong.
They say it wrong, which drives me crazy every time. But Hecate is the goddess of the crossroads. So she's the goddess of ushering people over to the other side, making sure that they get to their wherever after you believe in. So it was interesting that they decided to use her to bring him back over to the other side. It's too bad that they couldn't get them to pronounce it correctly. But also, Pagany, in the movie, Aunt Jet looks at Jillian and says, and the bruise on her face, and says, oh, mugwort will fix that right up. Mugwort, also called wormwood, is a topical anesthetic, an antibacterial and antifungal. So it relieves pain and burning and itching too. But is it
an anti-inflammatory? Would it take swelling down, or would it just make your skin feel a little better?
It's not an anti-inflammatory, but it's antibacterial. So it relieves pain. So it's a pain reliever. So it probably would have made sure it didn't get infected and probably took the sting out of it.
Okay. Sure.
It
sounded cool.
Yeah, and it sounded cool. Because, mugwort is very pagany.
Right. Yes.
Oh, the most famous scene, quote rather, keep rosemary at your garden gate, add pepper to your mashed potatoes, plant roses and lavender for luck, and fall in love whenever you can. Which is so sweet. People have it as signs in their house. I want one for my house.
Aww.
Rosemary is purifying, and it symbolizes virtue and remembrance. And
also, you don't need to water it very much. It'll just grow.
Yes, especially here in California. Yep. And then there's a little quote that's, where rosemary grows, a woman rules. And that's very, the feminism part of witchcraft. You're the ruler of your house. So keeping rosemary at the entrance to your home, at your garden gate, is very typical. Add pepper to your mashed potatoes. So this one is more specific to the book, where they're fighting. Sally's making mashed potatoes and Jillian's like, add more pepper. And, Sally's like, oh, you're such a know-it-all now that you have a boyfriend.
Now that you have been tamed and you're domesticated, and now you have an opinion about how the food gets cooked.
But there is some magical qualities to that, where pepper's a digestive aid, and it's great for focus, and it's a stimulant, and then it's also a symbol of protection. And then potatoes ground your root chakra. So adding pepper to your mashed potatoes would revitalize your intuition and your confidence. So even though I think it was just kind of thrown in to associate with the book, maybe there was a little magic to that, whether they knew it or not. And then plant roses and lavender for luck. Well, I think that's really a stretch. I actually had to Google this because I was like, really? Since when? And most of the results were specifically about the movie. But yellow roses can be used for luck. So I suppose if you planted yellow roses, that would work. And lavender does have some folklore regarding luck, but mostly it's keeping evil spirits away. So,
well, it's lucky.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Also, lavender grows pretty well without a lot of water here in the Central Valley as well.
Yes. So. And I do have lavender and rosemary in my yard. I'm not planting roses because they require so much water.
Oh.
And then falling in love whenever you can is just good advice. I enjoy being in love.
I enjoy being in love. I don't know about falling in love. And I don't know about the whole but again, like this way of this love lust, this lusty love that happens to people in the book and the movie, I don't truck with. And
in the book, in the movie, I don't know that they did love very well in either.
Yeah,
honestly.
I would say
it was a good rom-com sort of love, but there was a lot of lack of.
I personally feel for love to exist, it needs to grow, and in order for it to grow, you have to have shared experiences and bonding. I don't think you can love something instantly or some person. I think that's lust, and that can be a foundation and sure, blah, blah, blah. But I'm personally not a love at first sight kind of person. So, okay. And then also in both of them, the book and the movie, the thing with Sally and Gary, you know, he makes the comment like she makes the comment, you would never know if you were here because of a spell or because I needed you to cover for me. And that doesn't really get resolved. No, like he covers for her. He commits a crime. Right. Okay. But I mean, they buried somebody and, you know, like whatever. I don't know what that would be in the book. I'm not sure what the crime is for burying somebody without alerting people that they died. But that is a crime. That is one kind of crime.
Plus burying somebody on a non-grave site. Like
that's
there's
allowed,
a dead person in your yard.
That's allowed. You just have to file paperwork. But the thing is that he commits a felony. So that's true. You know what I mean? So, okay, fine, whatever. But the idea of whether or not
it's romantic.
Because it's a romantic felony.
Her.
You know what?
It was a token of his love for her.
I'm just saying.
It's very gangster. Like, let me commit a crime to show you I love you.
Yeah. And not just a misdemeanor, baby.
Right. It's a felony.
I could go to serious time for this.
It's hardcore love.
Yeah, I don't think that the book or the movie did a great job with romantic love. No. I think that they both attempted to do sister love with varying degrees. Yeah. I think that the book did a better job of sister love,
familial
especially
love,
with the younger girls having this shared bond experience and then like growing up together and all of that stuff. So, but the idea of falling in love whenever you can, like, I'm like, no, because I don't know. So, it sounds good. It looks good on a plaque, but it's not how I would live my personal model life.
Maybe if you think of it not associated with the book or the movie. The whole, you know, falling in love with your partner and continually to re-fall in love with your partner. I like that idea better than, you know, the book where the person being spelled lacks autonomy.
Right. And Jillian fell in love an awful lot before she was cured of all that and became a good woman. So again,
that's true.
I don't like it. Whatever.
Even though I think in the book she said, you know, actually, I don't know that I was ever in love before now.
Ben and his magic wand penis. Now I'm in love. Because he was the first guy who treated her nicely. So, like, again, like, but come on.
Well, I don't know, because everybody was always falling over her. So I'm sure lots of people...
That's how he fell in love with her. He was literally sitting in a restaurant and she walked past him and he was like, ba-doing, okay, there's hand motions here. And then, like, followed her over and her whole family bailed on her because she'd done something shitty. And so she cried and he fell in love with her while she cried and they shared food.
As a mother, I would also have been mad.
Pissed off. Somebody cut and dyed my child's hair.
Right.
Dude.
Especially the sister that you have not seen for years and just walks into your family and makes major changes. No. 13?
No. And it was sad. I didn't touch on it, but like Sally had saved money to give her a special piece of jewelry, and then Julian just kind of rips something off. She's like, "Oh yeah, here, have this,"
because
I need
she loves it so much more because Jillian is the
cool aunt, not the mom. Yeah, grumble.
Yes, as a mother, I read this very differently than I did, you know, as a young 20-something. Yeah.
My child has a cool aunt who does cool things with her, and that's great. And I love her cool aunt, and I'm not jealous most of the time, but every now and then I'm kind of like, you know, I'm cool too. I'm a cool mom, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
Anyways.
Yeah, that's all I had.
So, very last thought. Was it worth your time?
Yes. I'm so glad I revisited both. Yes. I think that watching it now as a mother, as a older adult, I got very different things out of it, and I felt really good about both still. Well, no, I didn't like the book first. Now I like the book, and I still really enjoy the movie for what it is.
I will say I really liked the writing style of the book. I found it very beautiful. I definitely have some quibbles with some plot things, and like I said, but I liked the overall story. I found it engaging and compelling and just very, very beautifully written. And the movie is harmless fun.
Yeah.
So totally worth it.
Cute. And as a pagan, you can see the symbolism in it and still enjoy it for a fun fantasy romp.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It has been a complete delight having you here.
Thank you.
This was so much fun, and I'm so glad that this worked out. And do you want to tell the nice people if they're a place where people could find you if they have questions about paganism or just in general?
I am on Instagram as Mama Brand Rocks, and I'm sure you can put that in the show notes for those that want to find it. I post lots of pictures of my family. I do tarot, witchcraft, food.
You teach an occasional class at a local...
do. I teach classes here in Fresno, and I can also travel within the greater California area on witchcraft and magical theory. A lot of those classes are here in Fresno in the Central Valley right now. And I also run Sabbats here in the Central Valley. And I'm also available to do that elsewhere. So feel free to reach out. And I'll probably set up some sort of Facebook page for that in the near future. And when I do, I'll give it to you.
Okay, great. And we're recording this early, so if that is there when this goes live, I will link it. And if it's not, we'll link a little thing that says to be announced later. And then someday we can always come back and add it onto the pagesandpopcorn.com.
Yay.
Okay. Well, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
This was fun.
Yes.